Hi VC, Dark Dove back with you again, and we're on to 1979 as part of Freddie Big Star's Gimmie 10 1970 series. We're at the final year of the 70s, and what a year it was musically. Now I am filming this on Monday, so I've decided I'm going to film my responses in advance, so that I'm not too influenced by what other people will show, but I'm sure a lot of what I'm going to show, a lot of them will probably turn up. Before I move on to my top 10 series, I just want to, briefly returning to 1978, and one major omission which I completely forgot to include in my top 10, and that is Steve Reich music for 18 musicians. I had this in the back of my head as one of my top 10 for 78, and then when I saw Freddie's video I completely went like this and said, shit, I forgot. This was one of the priciest records I think I've ever bought. I was only able to get this because I sold a rare classical album which I picked up in a flea market. Anyone who's tried to pick this up knows that it's very, very expensive on vinyl. This is a first press on ECM. Absolutely a fantastic, amazing piece of minimalist music from Steve Reich. As Freddie said, it's probably better to listen to on CD, but it's nice to have an original on vinyl. But I do actually have Steve Reich CD box set, so I do have it on CD, but although it's a different recording to that one. But I just wanted to get that out of the way because I totally forgot to show it in the last update. Now moving on to 79, what a year it was. Now starting off, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to show one of these is an album and the other is a 12-inch, and I think the 12-inch doesn't really count in the... Okay, right. First album in the top 10, the Human League reproduction. Human League's first album. This is very different to the kind of stuff that they would go on to become, have big chart success with in a couple of years' time. This is more kind of dark science fiction influenced synth pop. Some of I remember last I showed a 7-inch single, Circus of Death, and is on this. Blind Youth. They also do this a very interesting cover of You've Lost That Loving Feeling by the Righteous Brothers, which is quite interesting. A completely electronic kind of futuristic version, but very interesting cover as well. But it's kind of an album that's, I mentioned J.G. Ballard. It's strongly influenced by that kind of dystopian kind of sci-fi kind of, fear of the unknown, of what the future may bring. And the same year they released this. Now this is not a full-length album. This is a 12-inch, so I know I'm cheating a little, but it's the Dignity of Labour Parts 1 to 4. This is an entirely instrumental. This came out on the Fast label. It's an entirely instrumental piece, and it's very much more experimental than reproduction, but basically it's about Yuri Gagarin, and it's an original press that came with a bonus flexi. Now the flexi actually contains a spoken word interview with the band, but I'm not including this in my top 10 because it's not an album. So I know, being a bit cheeky. Okay, number 2 in the top 10 albums. Okay, I think a lot of people are going to be showing this. And I mean, it's one that really, it's very hard to leave this one out. And that is Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures. If there's one album that just dominates 1979, it is this one. And it didn't really even kind of sell in huge numbers in 1979. It was kind of relatively limited pressing. It was in the few years following that it really started to become, make its presence felt. But this is their debut. This is an original pressing. Now some first pressings glow red when you hold them under a light. This one doesn't. I'm not 100% sure why that is, but it's some kind of pressing fault. But it is an original press nonetheless. Yeah. So this album is again J.G. Ballard. A lot of kind of urban paranoia and kind of very dark theme, kind of influenced by the kind of industrial landscape of Manchester from which this album emerged, and of course that iconic cover designed by what was his name? Peter Saville. With that image, which I think is taken from it's a kind of a sound wave of a collapsing star, but fantastic piece of minimalist design. But yeah, Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division. It's an album which cannot ignore in compiling a top 10 of records from 1979. Again, now kind of in a similar vein again, I mean, kind of dystopian J.G. Ballard influenced kind of sci-fi stuff was all over the place in 79, and that was the case with with Gary Numan. Now this is recorded under the Tubeway Army moniker. Now he actually put out 2 albums in 79. Also the Pleasure Principle, which I was kind of strongly tempted to show that as well, but I just I decided to just show this one. This again is Our Friends Electric, Down in the Park, Replicas. Again, kind of a concept album really about this kind of future where I suppose it's a future which maybe is a little bit not too dissimilar to the world we're living in today, kind of ruled by technology and kind of where human relationships are kind of how shall we say, somewhat, I don't know, yeah, it's a kind of a cold technology led future, which is detailed on this album. And as I said, he released 2 fantastic albums in 79, and I also saw him last year live. That's the ticket. I saw him live here in Cork last year, and I put on a great show. But yeah, he released 2 great albums in 79, but this one was released under the Tubeway Army name. But after that, he just recorded under his name, Gary Numan. Okay, staying with post-punk. This is the debut album by a band who would go on to make a very big impact through the 80s, and that is The Cure with 3 Imaginary Boys. Again, this is an original UK copy, which I was very lucky to find in a charity shop a couple of years ago. So yeah, The Cure. Yeah, this along with their second album, which I'll be showing probably in the 19, if it goes into 1980, which I'll be showing. This was kind of a, you know, kind of a darker post-punk kind of a sound before they went on to develop a kind of a poppier, somewhat more commercial sound. But this has one of their most well-known early songs, "Killing an Arab," which generated some controversy when it was originally released, because some kind of far-right types thought that they were a Nazi band, but it's actually based on Albert Camus' novel, The Outsider. But also the song 5:14 on Saturday night. Yeah, so there's a great slice of post-punk, and it was kind of a darker direction to what they probably would go on to do. And then I like their later stuff now, The Cure, but particularly like this one, and their earlier, slightly darker stuff. Okay, now things are going to get a little bit more dark. In my 1977 thread, I showed a debut album by Throbbing Gristle on Industrial Records, and this, I don't have their second album, which came out in '78. Well, anyway, this came out in '79, and this is 20 Jazz Funk Greats. Now, there's no funk in it, and there's no jazz. The whole reasoning behind the title and this very kind of deceptively cheesy cover was to kind of fool it was kind of a prank, really, to kind of make record buyers think that this was some sort of easy listening album, and that they'd pick it up and bring it home and get something of a shock when they play it. But this is their third kind of proper kind of official album. Now, as with their debut, this is extremely dark, electronic, experimental. But there's also a couple of songs on this which are slightly kind of almost on the poppy side. Hot on the Heels of Love, in particular, is a track which has a kind of almost kind of a disco feel to it, and it's kind of an indicator of the way that Chris Carter and Cozy Fanny Tutti would go when the two of them, who by this point were a couple, would record. You know, when Throbbing Gristle split up, they continued as a musical duo. But the rest of the album is full of extremely dark and disturbing tracks like Convincing People and Persuasion. Now, this was released. I think the first pressing. Now, there are 2,000 copies pressed of the first press, and the first 1,000 copies came with a poster, and I'm very lucky to have a copy of that poster, showing you up there, which came with my copy. I got this for a nice enough price a few years ago. It's pricey enough generally, but I got it for an okay price, I think. But anyway, Now, moving on, staying with the Industrial Records label, this also came out in the year 1979 on that label, and this is by Thomas Leer and Robert Rental, and this is an album called The Bridge. I'll just show the industrial label there, because it's quite interesting. Yeah, so this is an album that was actually recorded closely in collaboration with members of Throbbing Gristle. It was recorded in Throbbing Gristle's own recording studio, and came out on their label, Industrial Records. Thomas Leer and Robert Rental were two Scottish experimental electronic musicians who were both based in London. And now Robert Rental had released a highly influential single in 1978 called Private Plane. Now he represents a kind of slightly more popular synth pop side of this album, which is represented by side 1, and Thomas Leer kind of this side 2, which is more darker kind of ambient side. Robert Rental unfortunately passed away prematurely in 2000. Thomas Leer kind of was involved in various projects in the 80s, but I think he's since retired from music. But they did leave this legacy of this fantastic album from '79, which still strongly stands the test of time. Okay, I don't think I'm going to keep it under 20 minutes, but we'll move on. Another great debut album, post-punk classic, the B-52s, with their self-titled debut, which came out, I think, on Sire. Was it Sire? Or... oh yeah, this one's on Mercury. So Rock Lobster is the best known track on this, and this is just really great, kind of fun, new wave kind of poppy punk kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but this album is just great fun, believe me. Excuse me. I'm just kneeling down to kind of okay. Klaus Schulze. This is an album released in '79 called June, and this is actually the last Schulze album that I have. I don't have anything by him past this, which is really a shame. But yeah, obviously influenced by the Frank Herbert novel, movie itself, which wasn't to be filmed for another 5 years or so by David Lynch. This would actually make a perfect soundtrack to that album, or sorry, to that movie, but it didn't. Side 1 is entirely instrumental, and side 2 has vocals by Arthur Brown of Amazing World of Arthur Brown, Fire fame, which is a very interesting track. It's basically two long tracks, basically, and it's a great kind of space rock electronic. It's up there with the best of his early stuff, I think, and I just love that cover with that kind of shiny, kind of almost mirror effect, and it's on Brain. So Klaus Schulze. Now David Bowie returns in this top 10. This is the last of his Berlin trilogy. Came out 2 years after the other two entries, Low and Heroes, and this is Lodger. Um, Not as good an album as those two previous entries, but this is an album that kind of divides a lot of people. It's certainly not his strongest album of the 70s, but I think it's one that deserves a place in the top 10. Definitely, there's some really good strong tracks on here. There's one track in particular. It's kind of what's it called again? Yassassin, which is a kind of a Turkish influence. Also, that track Boys Keep Swinging, which was released as a single, and DJ, which is another great one. Yeah, it's an album that kind of divides people, but I do like it. Well, you know, I will admit it's really not one of his strongest albums. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not showing because I only have it on CD. Fall Witch Live at the Witch Trials, that came out that year. A classic album, but I don't have it on vinyl. I'm going to end up with, or finish up with an Irish folk album. This is called Promenade, and this is by Kevin Burke and Micheál O'Donnell. Now, Micheál O'Donnell went on to record on the Windham Hill label, and this album has a slight, kind of little bit of a, maybe I wouldn't say ECM, but has a little bit of it. Maybe would kind of fit quite neatly onto the Windham Hill label, I think. This is a nice, very nice chamber piece. It's Irish folk, but not. This is electric piano, and Kevin Burke on fiddle, Micheál O'Donnell on vocals and guitar, and there's a lot of harmony vocals in here as well from some backing singers. Donal Lunny, folk legend Donal Lunny, appears on this as well, adding bouzouki. It's on a label called Mulligan, which personally is one of my favourite Irish folk labels. It was set up by Donal Lunny, and it was active in the later half of the 80s and into the later half of the 70s and into the early 80s. And this is one of my personal favourite releases on that label, Promenade. And it's kind of a hard enough one to find, but I was lucky to find it myself. Pick it up cheaply in a charity shop a couple of years ago. But it's a very relaxing album, and it's, you know, it's one of my personal favourites in the Irish folk genre. Okay, so I've gone slightly over time, 20 minutes. Looking forward to 1980, if Freddie decides to go into the 80s, which I think quite possibly he will. But anyway, thanks for watching, and everybody have a great weekend.